Welcome to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. Tonight's top stories. Polls show they're in the minority, but some young adults are bucking the gay marriage trend and speaking out for traditional unions. We have the details. Papal handicappers said last spring that this man could be the next pope. So what does Cardinal Peter Turkson think of Pope Francis and his leadership? We'll bring you our exclusive interview. And adults over age 65 are now the fastest growing segment of the U.S. population. Pope Francis says we need to value their insights more. We'll discuss his comments and a Catholic view of aging.
The eyes of the world have been in Washington all this week. Today they will also see Congress reach a historic bipartisan agreement to reopen the government and avert a default on the nation's bills.
This is far less than many of us had hoped for, frankly, but it's far better than what some had sought.
The stalemate in Washington appears to be at a close as Congress moves toward a bipartisan deal to end the government shutdown and increase the nation's debt ceiling. Thanks for joining us. Well, there's nothing like a deadline to end partisan gridlock and spur politicians to action. With only hours left before a potential default on the nation's credit, the Senate has agreed on a bill to increase the federal debt limit. The measure would also reopen parts of the government that have been shut down for 15 days. Today's development comes after weeks of dispute over Obamacare, but Republican leadership has agreed to put concerns about the health care law on hold. The Senate is expected to vote on the bill tonight, with a House vote to follow shortly afterward. If it passes Congress, President Obama is expected to swiftly sign the legislation into law. It's billed as America's premier conservative event. And this year's Values Voters Summit, which wrapped up in Washington Sunday, featured plenty of big-name politicians. But the conference also drew its share of young adults. EWTN News Nightly reporter Jonathan Liedl was there to see how these young conservatives are feeling about one of today's most contentious issues.
If you want to attract college kids, you need one thing: free pizza. And they had plenty of it at the Value Voters Summit student seminar held at this Washington, D.C. hotel last Friday. But speakers at the event, like Ryan Anderson, dished up something that many young people find less appetizing: an argument for the traditional definition of marriage as a man-woman union.
Marriage is a permanent, exclusive, monogamous relationship of sexually complementary spouses. The challenge here is to show what marriage is, why it matters, and what the consequences are of redefining it, and to do that in a way that connects with the younger generations. And so it's harder to connect with that generation about what marriage really is and why it really matters.
According to a recent poll, 65% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 29 support redefining marriage to include same-sex couples, a position even backed by some at this conservative event.
Gay marriage, yeah, why not?
Most here don't share that view, but they know they're in the minority.
I feel like a lot of people are just wanting to be current and relevant, and so whatever that is, they're willing to embrace that.
For many of these students, joining other young adults who support traditional marriage was a welcome change.
It shows me that I'm not alone, like as a young person, that it's not just old people who, and like outdated people who have this view.
Attendees also appreciated the opportunity to pick the brain of one of traditional marriage's most forceful defenders.
It makes me extremely thankful that there are adults that are willing to invest in young people and provide them with opportunities that they may not have had in dealing with these issues.
Meaning students of this college mixer with more than just a full stomach.
So the takeaway message here is that the younger generation will be with us if we can persuade them, if we can equip them, if we can empower them, if we can make the arguments. They're not going to give up on marriage unless we give up on them.
Joining me now to discuss the same-sex marriage debate and young adults is Ryan Anderson, co-author of What is Marriage? Man and Woman, A Defense. I'm also joined by Damon Owens, Executive Director of the Theology of the Body Institute. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Ryan, I'll start with you. We're generally told that this is a lost cause among the young. You know, we're on the wrong side of history. There's an air of inevitability about this. Right. Is there actually any sort of resistance movement among the young to the same-sex marriage push?
Yep. I mean, and the most important thing to keep in mind is that this is exactly what they told the pro-life movement 40 years ago, that they were on the wrong side of history, that theirs was a lost cause, and that the younger generation was against them. And what we see 40 years later is that my generation is now more pro-life than my parents' generation. The latest Gallup polls show a majority of Americans identify as pro-life. And the reason why is that the pro-lifers 40 years ago got to work. They made the arguments, they came up with the coalitions, they started the think tanks and the various groups who have been teaching about the life issues. And the same thing is now happening on the marriage question.
And Damon, why do you think this is such an uphill battle right now? Why do we find ourselves having to do so much work with young people specifically to convince them of the nature of marriage?
Well, I think in many ways, excuse me, it's a perfect storm of issues that was been taken advantage of with the issue. And we're looking at young people in terms of a number of philosophies, depending on how deep you want to go, but also influences that go back decades, as well as more broadly redefinitions of marriage that have made the same-sex marriage question even something that's worthy to be considered.
So what were some of those steps leading up to the widespread acceptance of same-sex marriage?
Well, as Ryan and Sharif and Robbie George put it in their book, you know, there are fundamental issues and truths about what marriage is that can be discussed either through a religious lens, but more easily through a secular and just human history. Well, you're looking at the permanence of marriage. You look at the procreative expectation that when you're married, that your children will be expected from that, whether you have them or not. It's a cultural expectation. And then we can look even in the last 50 years at look at whether court decisions or cultural mores where we no longer expect marriages to be permanent. We no longer expect them to be procreative. So what other human adult relationships are those that should be have approbation in the culture? And it becomes this sense that relationships are things that are be affirmed by others, and they're primarily centered on the affectations and the desires of the adults involved, not the subsequent consequences of them.
So if our modern understanding of marriage is more about adults' romantic feelings than the public purpose of marriage or creating stable households for children, if that has been widely accepted in our culture, then Ryan, how do you answer people who say, look, you straights already sort of messed up marriage. I mean, why not let gays take a shot at it? Otherwise, aren't you just being a bigot?
Sure. The answer there is that we've already seen for the past 40 years the social science consequences of the sexual revolution, and it hasn't been good for children, hasn't been good for women. So why would you want to double down on all of the mistakes of the past generation and codify that permanently into law by redefining marriage to just make it about adult romance and adult desires, rather than the needs of children and the family type that best meets those needs? So from a government perspective, they're not in the marriage business because they care about the love lives of consenting adults. If marriage is just about romance, get the government out of the marriage business. The reason the state's in the marriage business is that children need a mom and a dad, and marriage is the way that you get a man and a woman to commit to each other permanently and exclusively as husband and wife, to then be mother and father to any children that their union creates. When this doesn't happen, the consequences for children, the consequences for the whole political community are really quite dramatic. It's not good.
So how does this, how do you answer the question then that, well, it doesn't hurt my marriage, I'm still going to be loyal to my wife, I'm still going to raise my kids a certain way, it doesn't hurt me if gay couples also unite in marriage. So how directly does this impact children?
Yeah. I'll just say three things in response to that. The first is that the law teaches, and the law will teach something about marriage. It'll teach that marriage need not entail both a man and a woman, need not entail both a mother and a father, that the sexes are more or less interchangeable, and that therefore to even say that a child needs a mother and a father has been relegated to hate speech. You're now a bigot if you suggest a child needs a mother and a father. It'd be really hard for the law to teach that fathers are essential when it's redefined marriage to make fathers optional. The second is that there's no reason why the law would stop redefining marriage here. Once you say the union of a man and a woman is irrational and arbitrary, and that marriage is just about love and romance can come in every different size and shape imaginable. So what's so special about the number 2 once you say that one man and one woman's irrational and arbitrary? And then lastly, religious liberty. We've already seen Catholic Charities adoption agencies in Boston and Illinois and right here in D.C. have been forced to get out of the adoption business because they wanted to find homes for orphans with mothers and fathers, married moms and dads, and the state said that's discrimination. So it's pretty direct, 3 different ways in which you can articulate how it will impact marriage culture.
Damon, one of the most powerful arguments for same-sex marriage has been that this is a matter of civil rights. This is equality for all, and that the push for same-sex marriage, is the equivalent of the civil rights movement in MLK's day. And this has especially been directed to the African-American community. Hey, this is just the newest version of the civil rights cause, and the NAACP has gotten on board. How do you answer that?
Well, this actually, excuse me, goes back to some prior work. I was privileged to work with the National Organization for Marriage and more public-facing secular arguments. And really it's a matter of taking the spirit, if you will, of the civil rights movement versus the actual words that were written. And it doesn't take much to just pull up. You can Google the letter from the Birmingham jail, which most consider to be really the manifesto of the civil rights movement. Dr. King was in jail being accused by other pastors of agitation and of not being timely, of not waiting, and encouraging people to break the law. And he spoke very specifically about how the law is understood in the broader context of built on other laws. And he says, I agree with St. Augustine that a just law is a law that's rooted in the natural law or God's law. And the difference between a just and an unjust law is precisely where it fits into that coordination with the natural law or the divine law. So there are connections that say this is not just the arbitrary, this is law because I say so as a positivism, but really one that's rooted in a deeper truth of who we are. And I'll just say this, with the Theology of the Body Institute, we found that the deeper arguments are the ones that affirm what people already know. This isn't about changing people's mind on the meaning of marriage. It's about building confidence in those who know what marriage is, but for the first time in human history have to defend things that are intuitively known. So building the confidence of what people already know about marriage is the primary work, really, of believers, Christian or otherwise. And then had these secular-facing arguments are the ones that really provide the deeper analysis and the deeper understanding that I authentically believe will be a leapfrog in terms of the deeper knowledge we have as believers and understanding where marriage places itself, not only in the well-being of the culture, but also in the salvation story.
Damon Owens, Ryan Anderson, thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
We have to run to a break, but when we come back, an exclusive interview with Vatican-based Cardinal Peter Turkson. Stay with us. Welcome back to EWTN News Nightly. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell. At the Vatican, the Pope's new Secretary of State was set to be installed yesterday, but he didn't make it to the ceremony. Let's go to Alan Holdren in Rome, who has the story. Alan, what happened?
Archbishop Pietro Parolin missed his own welcoming ceremony because he was in the hospital for an emergency operation for an appendicitis. He's only 58 years old. So this was a bit of a surprise. People who know him said that he's otherwise in very good health. The main person who was there with Pope Francis was the outgoing Cardinal Secretary of State, Tarcisio Bertone. The Pope thanked him, he bid him farewell, and we're looking forward to meeting this new Secretary of State in the coming weeks.
All right. And Alan, a bishop from Germany is under fire for spending more than $42 million on a new residence and office complex. He's also facing charges for lying under oath about taking a first-class flight to India to visit the poor. What can you tell us about the controversy?
Well, we're talking about Bishop Franz Peter Tabarts von Elst of the Diocese of Limburg, Germany. He inherited this building project from his predecessor, and it's exceeded all budget projections. In this complex is a $3.9 million chapel, a $20,000 bathtub, and a more than $30,000 conference table. A Vatican cardinal went up to the Diocese of Limburg last month to look into the situation. This week, the president of the German Bishops' Conference came here to Rome to brief Pope Francis on it, and right now we've got the Bishop of Limburg himself here in Rome, presumably to speak about this situation. Pope Francis has repeatedly called for priests to live simpler lifestyles since the beginning of his pontificate.
And Alan, we caught a glimpse of Pope Emeritus Benedict on Monday. What was the occasion?
Well, the statue of Our Lady of Fatima came here to Rome, to the Vatican, for Marian Days, an initiative for the Year of Faith. And before it even went to Pope Francis, it was taken to Benedict XVI, where he was able to pray there in front of Our Lady. This is the first time we've seen Benedict in quite a while, and it's only the third time that we've seen him in video since his February resignation. So it's a great opportunity to see him. He looks pretty good for a man of 86 years old.
Good to know. Thanks, Alan. Well, Pope Francis said recently that one of the gravest evils of our time is the loneliness of the elderly. It's a message he's repeated often since his election. In fact, Francis launched his pontificate last March by urging his fellow cardinals to embrace old age. It's a time of peace and prayer, he told them, a time to share your life's wisdom with the young. But how can the Pope's message connect with today's youth-obsessed culture? Here to talk about that with us is Mother Paul Mary of the Little Sisters of the Poor, a religious order dedicated to creating homes where elders are valued. I'm also joined by Lorraine Bennett, author of A Year of Grace, 365 Reflections for Caregivers. That book will be released this spring. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mother Paul, I'll begin with you. The question of aging from a spiritual perspective, I think there's often a lot of focus on suffering, because so often physical suffering is a big part of the aging process. But what about the side of gifts? We don't hear much in our culture about any spiritual gifts that one receives during the aging process, spiritual growth that's possible only through the aging process. But in your home and your work with the elderly, I'm sure you've seen that side.
Well, I think the Holy Father is focusing so much on the elderly because he realizes that's such a crucial moment in a life, that a person is, no matter what their past has been, they're living their present, and if they can realize at that moment how much our Lord loves them, how much he wants them to be with himself forever, then all the rest can go away. And that's what we would like our elderly to realize, that he's waiting for them, and that any pain or suffering that they are enduring, they can give to others through the life of the Church. But more than that, we don't want them to be unhappy. We don't want them to be alone. We want to share. We want to accompany them on the last part of their journey, just so that they realize through the people with whom they share their lives how much our Lord loves them. And so, and I think the thing that they really understand is, at that moment in life, it's not about stuff. There's nothing that they're attached to, but if they're loved, if they're embraced by the people that care for them, and it's not a job, it's a family, then they're at home and they're at peace with God.
And Lorraine, I know in my experience, I recently wrote a book about my father's journey through Alzheimer's. My husband's a geriatrician, so this is a very personal topic for me. But you had an experience with your own mother that really helped you see both the ups and downs of this process, especially for frail elderly. Tell us a little about that.
Well, yes, my mother, who at the age of 90, she had been very active. She was a vibrant person. She was an artist and a writer, and she suffered an incapacitating stroke. So she was completely devastated by the stroke. She could no longer, she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, she couldn't eat, she couldn't read, she couldn't do anything that she used to do. So we really came face to face with that experience of what is the purpose of suffering, and what does it mean? Because today's culture, I think, says that suffering is pointless and should be avoided at all cost, right? Even to the extent of maybe taking a life, because we want to avoid it so much.
Did you see any gifts your mother was able to bring despite her weakness and frailty?
Exactly. That was the thing, is that despite the situation of not really being able to do anything, we discovered that there is meaning in suffering, which is what our faith tells us. And we discovered many gifts that she was able to experience, both gifts she could give me. Well, by her presence here, she was able to experience the birth of her first great-grandchild, and she got to meet my daughter-in-law, so she had never met her before. And so things like that she gave to us, and we really learned a lot from her, I have to say. So there are many gifts the elderly can give us.
And Mother Paul, we're almost out of time, but one of the main themes of Pope Francis's remarks has been the need to stop this age segmentation in our culture, this idea that the old are over here, the young are over here, and never the two shall meet. You have opportunities in your homes, run by Little Sisters of the Poor, to mix the two groups. What gifts do you see elders bringing to younger folks? Because we focus a lot on what the young can bring elders, but...
Well, I think the primary thing they bring to youth, and we have all kinds of kids, either college students that are there for the summer or high school kids, I mean, all bunch of kids. So, but what they bring predominantly is, hey, we're just people like you, and we love you, and we still want to give of ourselves. And there's something precious that we can give to you. And they do. And in the measure that these young people see that they're just people. They're just like me. They realize, you know, a whole new dimension that the elderly bring to them.
And a focus on being as opposed to just having and doing.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mother Paul Mary, Lorraine Bennett, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, you may remember his name from the frenzied media coverage leading up to last spring's papal conclave. Cardinal Peter Turkson, president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, was widely speculated to be a leading candidate for Pope. Tonight, we bring you an exclusive interview with Cardinal Turkson, who formerly served as an archbishop in Ghana. EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi caught up with him this week in Baltimore, where he was visiting the headquarters of Catholic Relief Services.
You've been in 2 conclaves now. We can't talk about what happened inside, but this last time people were betting that you were going to come out as the Pope. As you processed into the Sistine Chapel, what was going through your mind?
I realize all of that, and so if you want, I also forgive the very many who are so speculating, because they didn't have a single clue about what it meant to go into a conclave, or even for the Catholic Church to choose a Pope. So going in to choose somebody who would also be, you know, Christ's vicar on that, somebody that it will please God and it will please the Lord Jesus to consider as successors to Peter. You know, almost having all of this ringing in your mind, you go in there and you cannot afford not, you know, to simply pray about this and just pray that God, you know, would just, you know, choose, knowing the situation in the world now and knowing what the church is up against.
You know, I would like to talk a little bit about Pope Francis. What's it like when you meet him behind the scenes? What's that like?
What you see is what you get. It's like that. What you see is what really the person is. Okay, so he's a very simple person. Very, you know, very spiritual, deeply spiritual, and who shares his spirituality with all who come to him.
You know, one of the things he mentioned was, he said sometimes we focus a little too much on abortion, and some pro-lifers, some that are pro-life witnesses at the grassroots level were hurt by those words. There's others who support...
They didn't have to be hurt by those. I think, you know, it is not to be dismissive of issues already expressed, but it is to respond also to the need to enrich or to complete, if you want to portray the fullness of the picture.
There's one other critical voice that I wanted to raise, and I know you're a member of the Congregation for Divine Worship, and some people that are more affiliated with the traditional Latin Mass are worried. They're blogging. Do they have any fear? Should they have any fears under this Pope that the Latin Mass will go away?
I mean, why should anybody have any fear about anything? You know, I think if you know, for nothing at all, people should probably recognize that this Pope has enough sensitivity to be able to recognize what his predecessors have done. And if his predecessors have done this, they must also, you know, also consider that he also understands why they did whatever they did. If Benedict made concessions for such a thing, okay, I think it would just be fair to grant, you know, Francis the sensibility of recognizing why Benedict allowed, you know, this or the celebration of Mass or whatever. And so for me, I'd say the fear, it probably is not, it's not too founded.
One last question. As the church, as we go forward as a church, what are you most excited about as you look at the worldwide church right now?
Oh, what I'm most excited about is that we see that if every leadership that we get of the church comes with their own charisms. The gifts of the Holy Spirit are countless. And as each Pope comes with, you know, with the special endowments to enrich the church and lead the church towards the fulfillment of its mission, that's what excites me about the church and its leadership.
That was Cardinal Peter Turkson. Some say say it's one of the most dangerous games our children play, resulting in concussions and life-threatening injuries. But risky or not, football is America's most popular sport. And while some coaches and parents focus only on the winning, others say football can teach players some very Catholic virtues. EWTN News Nightly reporter Wyatt Goolsby has the story.
Go! Set! Go! The fall football season is in full swing for players of all ages. Hundreds of thousands are competing in Pop Warner Leagues, the U.S.'s largest youth football organization. 1, 2, 3. Based in Washington, D.C., the 8- and 9-year-old Watkins Hornets are traditionally one of the top Pee-wee programs in the nation. But here, success is not measured by wins alone. This year, the Hornets, along with other Pop Warner League teams, are participating in USA Football's Heads Up initiative. It's a program that promotes player safety.
The drills are different from when I played. I was told that lead with your helmet and try to knock somebody out. Now these days they teach you to keep your head up, eyes up, hit, wrap, and grab claw, more so upper body tackling.
Teaching players how to avoid getting hurt has become a growing trend in recent years with rising concerns over head injuries like concussions. But some say programs that promote player safety do more than just prevent injuries. They also play a role in teaching players values like discipline and sacrifice. That's one of the points made by Dr. Bill Thierfelder, a leading sports psychologist and president of Belmont Abbey College, who spoke recently at a Catholic Athletes for Christ conference in Manassas, Virginia. Thierfelder doesn't downplay the seriousness of sports-related injuries, but he says injuries offer a chance to develop faith and trust.
The injuries part of real stuff. You are injured. This is the present moment. This is where you are. And for some reason, if you can't even, maybe you don't know God's will right now for you. You can't figure it all out. Like, why would this happen? But it comes back to faith.
And Thierfelder says learning to play sport the right way is actually a very Catholic notion.
Our nature is to break these things into boxes. So I'm going to do the praying over here, but the sports is over here. No. My soul is with me when I'm on the court, on the field, whatever I'm doing, my soul is working. What's so beautiful about sport is that it's an opportunity to develop the virtues. Vice can be developed in there too, if you don't know what you're doing.
Thierfelder says the character-building lessons that sports offer apply both to the players in the game and the parents watching from the stands. Vanessa Ricks, whose 8-year-old son DeAndre plays for the Hornets, says she's seen parents yelling and screaming at athletes.
For my son and for the parents, I tell them to calm down and make it fun for your kid. Because the funner you can make it, the more your child will want to be out there.
So I think we have to be careful that we don't think either play is trivial, or that it's a timeout from real life, or that sport's not important, or that it's bad and we shouldn't have anything to do with it. As Catholics, we've got to take it back and affect the whole culture and make it really what it was supposed to be.
1, 2, 3.
Finally tonight, we know him better as Blessed Pope John Paul II, and on April 27th of next year, we'll be calling him Saint John Paul. But 35 years ago today, the man then known as Cardinal Carroll Wojtyła of Poland emerged on the balcony of St. Peter's to become our new pope. EWTN News Nightly recently visited the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception here in D.C. to find out what folks remember about the late John Paul. Here's what they told us.
Pope John Paul is such a spiritual man, very spiritual.
The Pope wanted to reiterate that you can be like Jesus Christ if you live your life like him.
I think the most impressive thing to me is the way he reached out to people.
He was genuine, Since he forgave the guy who took a shot at him, that in itself said everything.
He was really big back home, the Philippines, very important person.
Just calmness and peacefulness. He just brought everybody together, made everybody feel so welcome and loved.
When he died, I was an atheist. I was away from the church, but I remember watching the funeral on television, and I cried. I didn't really know why, but I remembered that he loved me and that I felt loved by him. So, yeah, he's a special saint for me.
That's all for tonight. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And you can catch our entire program again on EWTN's YouTube page. I'm Colleen Carroll Campbell, and on behalf of all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.